Okay, team, we are getting close here. We are going to talk about our property valuation modernization bill, which might be finished, hoping is finished. Valiant effort on Abby's part. And then we're going to talk about cannabis. And then, if we're really lucky, we're going to get to art and state buildings programs. It's a nice way to round out the day. A little bit of art.
A lot of extracurricular activities.
Yeah. So Abby, if you want to join us and take us through the bill for perhaps a final time? Is that silly of me to think that? Okay.
Great. For the record, Abby Shepherd, Office of Legislative Counsel. Sorry, I'm just trying to get into the meeting. I don't know if I'm using the right Zoom link. Sorry. Oh, a new one.
Zoom link, I don't see that.
Would you like me to share the language? There is also now a section by section for the language. I could run through either. The changes are all highlighted, so it might make sense to look at since we have been going.
Let's do the highlighted changes and then we can do a section by section if we need to.
Okay.
Was that what you were going to say? Or were you going to say the opposite of that? I interrupted you.
No, I think it would make sense to see what the new language is because we have been really in the weeds. So I want to make sure you know what I've changed.
Thank you.
So am I in the right place? Still no? I'll try again. Sorry, I'm just trying to get on the Zoom.
It's okay.
Sure. But I just.
I think I'm gonna need to restart.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, guys.
It's okay.
Oh, no, wait, here she is. There you are. Let's keep going.
Nice and big, the language that we have been reviewing over the last couple of days. I left highlighted, I removed the highlighting from what we looked at yesterday, and now what's highlighted is what's new from yesterday. This is now draft 4.2 with today's date, and the section by section corresponds to that. Numbering, there is now, and I'll just take it page by page, there's now a findings section that lays out several different facts and statistics taken from various studies. The first, as well as from the Department of Taxes data, summarized both by their internal staff, but also what is in the PVR annual report. And that's based on grand list data from 2022. So I can walk through and read the findings. I don't know what is the most appropriate. There is also a lot of information here from a review from different studies and reports, as well as news articles and a lawsuit that's since been settled on racial discrimination in property appraisal, both for housing finance as well as property tax purposes. So there's a lot in here, a lot of citations.
And this, please, I don't think you need to read it out loud. We all have eyes. Right? Okay. And the language did not come from my mind or Abby's mind. It was offered by either the Department of Taxes or Susanna Davis. Susanna Davis specifically for this bill. It wasn't from the PowerPoint. She offered it as findings of this bill.
And provided sources, which I have now included in here and, cross-checked to make sure that everything is.
And just so folks know who are newer, so you told me that findings have to be, will you say what about findings?
Sure. So findings are not, this isn't changing anything in the law. It's stating facts and statistics. So this is what the General Assembly is saying. We are taking note of these facts. And then you go on in the rest of the body of the bill to make your changes to statute. These are not required, but they are often included in bills that maybe are more contentious or where you want to be clear about the purpose and sort of the impetus behind the bill.
And they have, I remember you saying like they need to have very clear, reliable sources. Like we talked about one,
Cannot make these up.
we talked about one organization that we get a lot of emails from about taxes and how perhaps that was like a little not quite reliable enough to be included, for instance.
That's why in particular here, there are some news sources that are cited, but within those, I went through to pull out the studies that those were based on. So it is, academic research that, and all of these are things that you can find and that I will include in the bill folder if anyone is interested in seeing more. There's a lot of data out there.
And the reason the reason I thought it was important to have a finding section was because there was a while we were like, what exactly is the problem we're trying to solve here? And this is the problem we're trying to solve. It's sort of these two bodies of fact.
And I'm just scrolling back up to show the Vermont specific numbers. So it is from this year's annual PBR report, but it's based on Grand List data in 2021. Just to be clear.
Did you mean capitalize real?
That is how they present themselves. That's their, yes, I'm not sure why I took that from their documents that are available online. I think they even have a little registered mark after it, so it's maybe their trade name.
Huh, okay.
Okay. Then all of that's highlighted in yellow. So there are 3 subdivisions, and this is all the sources for what you'd heard from Susanna Davis in her testimony. So most of that is taken from her documents. Moving on to the substance of the bill and where statute is being amended. There is a section by section now for, it's hopefully easier to follow in terms of the timeline. So this is structured now a bit more chronologically, similar to how it was yesterday. The section numbers in the bill are chronological now. So you have, starting on passage, there's this immediate change to the required reappraisals section where it strikes the CLA as a trigger. So sorry, I'm scrolling perhaps too much, but there we go. It does not change the $850 per parcel fee immediately. That's changed later in the bill and later in time. It does, so here's the striking of the common level of appraisal. It does retain the ability for the state to sort of have a penalty if a municipality does not conduct a reappraisal in the interim, waiting for the state reappraisal program to take effect. So it sort of keeps the status quo, except it removes one of the triggers, which is the CLA. That's 85% below or 115% above fair market value. The second change is on page 5 to subdivision D. As we saw, this is more of a technical change. So it's striking this appropriation in this section and moving it into an assessor education section. So try and keep moving through these quickly. But again, just to remind you, the striking of the $850 per parcel fee takes effect January 1st of 2025. And then immediately effective, but with these different dates for transfer, there will be 2 one-time appropriations. So this is a slight change from, or a more significant change from what you saw yesterday. There will be 2 one-time appropriations. The first will be in this budget cycle, so in fiscal year 24, and it's a $50,000 appropriation from the general fund to the Department of Taxes to assist them so that they may contract out for outside expertise when they're conducting the implementation plan. And that was a request from the department.
So Abby, going back, I see that where you say it's 2024, but with the 850 being struck, I don't see where the date.
It's in fiscal year 2024, so that's in this upcoming budget cycle. So that's just the one time. Further on in the bill, there will be an ongoing annual appropriation, which you did see yesterday, and it's still the January 1st date. So I will get to that momentarily. I'm trying to keep it chronological. That's a different, okay, so there are 2. I'll make sure I cover both. Thank you for reminding me. So these are one time. So it's first in this this upcoming budgeting year, so fiscal year 24. The second appropriation is.
That's just $50,000 for like a little bit of staffing.
Correct, for contracting out while they're doing the implementation plan, the progress report, all of those deliverables that are for December of 2024. The department is allowed to contract out for other assistance with that. In the second one-time appropriation, this is where we discussed yesterday, it can only really be intent language to appropriate for in fiscal year 25, a sufficient fund for the Department of Taxes to start up the new program, which won't take effect until 6 months later, July 1st of 2025, and it would be based on the department's implementation plan and the recommendation that they will be likely contracting out to some extent with an outside consultant. So the timing for this, the reason why it's also in fiscal year 25 and not a date certain, is the legislature in the previous draft, I think it was January 1st, the legislature most likely will not be in session at that point, so it can happen within any point of fiscal year 25. So that would be at any point after the department has submitted its implementation plan, one of the deliverables of which is a cost estimate for running the new program. The next change, so these are all of the statutory changes you've seen so far, all to the same section of statute. They're in separate sections of the bill because they take effect at different points in time. Section 5 now is taking effect July 1st of 2025. So this is when the new state appraisal program would be starting up. It retains the coefficient of dispersion. There's no longer the CLA that will have been already repealed for 2 years. It no longer requires municipalities to reappraise, and it removes the penalty where if a municipality fails to reappraise, they can have state funds withheld. So that will no longer be applicable. So all of that has been repealed in this version. And that again is what you saw yesterday. The state appraisal and reappraisal, so it's an expansion of the program that was created last year and will take effect this year. This expansion now will take effect on July 1st of 2025. So the department will have its implementation plan at the end of December that will be submitted to the General Assembly. The General Assembly will meet and you have that intention language saying the General Assembly will appropriate funds so that the department could start hiring and creating its program, which will then take effect 6 months later in July. So this is language you've seen. I'm just scrolling to where you haven't seen language that's all highlighted. So it's subsection C. The new language is on page 9. The first change, as you discussed yesterday, there is some uncertainty about how frequent statistical reappraisals should be conducted. This removes the 2-year requirement, so it still would enact into statute the requirement for the commissioner to conduct or to contract out statistical reappraisals. It just doesn't state how frequently. And that is one of the deliverables in their implementation plan is how frequently and how should statistical reappraisals be scheduled. So that keeps the requirement but isn't as specific as to time. This version does not amend or change in any way the 6-year full reappraisal requirement. So that hasn't been changed from the last draft. There's a new subdivision in subsection C, which appropriates a little over $2.5 million annually from the general fund to PVNR. And I don't want to put Julie on the spot, but that is very similar.
I think that's what Julia said.
Julie.
So it's not really putting her on.
So I won't speak to how that number was chosen. But so that you know, the 850 has been repealed, that would be going to towns. The money, this 2.54 million would be going to PVNR. And then in the following section is where you still have a per parcel fee going to towns, but it's increased from $1 to $2. So that increase is reflected in the 2.54 million.
And this is all, I mean, it's important intent language, but for all functional purposes, this is really intent language and is like in really no way binding whatsoever, right?
Just because
Because that's just.
this is enacted in this statute, however, you have 2 years in which the General Assembly could change any of this, which I anticipate, given the implementation plan and the breadth of all of these changes, this section in particular would be likely to change.
Just curious, does that number of the 2.54 million and the $2 per grand list parcel, does that all sort of add up to? I'll have to ask.
I defer to Julia. She'll be able to.
Does that all add up to sort of what the state is spending now, sending out to $850 per parcel to all the towns? Is it more or less the same, or is it a little bit different?
Great question, Julie Richter, Joint Fiscal Office. So the FY24 estimate for the reappraisal, total reappraisal of the $850 per parcel is coming out at about 2.9 million.
Okay.
So the way that we reached the 2.54 million is I received guidance to estimate in a similar manner that they currently do with the 8.5 per parcel, but instead do a 7.5 per parcel.
Okay. How many, the 350,000 parcels, 330, is that right?
A bit more, so the preliminary grand list 2022 estimates, we're still waiting on those to be finalized, have 338,000.
All right.
352.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Julia. So section 7 has the increase of the other per parcel fee. It's increased from $1 to $2. There are no changes there. Section 8 is the implementation plan, and there are actually 2 progress reports. That is for both the creation of new property categories and for standing up a statewide reappraisals office. That would take effect on July 1st of this year, so it immediately requires these 2 deadlines for different reports. There is one, so it's kind of like a progress report check back this December 2023, progress report in the first 6 months of implementing the office and defining new categories of property. Then the second report is December 15th, 2024. That's where changes were made following yesterday's testimony. Oops. Sorry.
Ooh, better.
I'm grabbing onto the touchpad too much, I guess. Yes, so looking at the question of how frequently and how to determine which towns would be having a statistical reappraisal, there is within how the department is recommending the administration of reappraisals will be conducted. There is now an additional word added there. So any proposed adjustments to the frequency and efficacy of conducting statistical reappraisals. It's fairly broad, so it leaves it open to how does the department think statistical reappraisals should be conducted and how frequently they should be done. That's the first change compared to yesterday's draft.
Do you wanna?
And then there is also a new subdivision that is adding in any consideration, and we'll let the chair.
This is just, so I basically just forgot this part. Because I don't know if folks remember that we heard testimony from the state GIS system folks about how helpful it is when they have the full map and how they don't always have the full map. So just want to make sure that sort of having that work out would be helpful as part of the study. Yes,
I appreciate the word incentivize being included in that.
great.
Because I think everyone wants to share data, it just sometimes is hard.
Effortful, yes. And so I think the idea of this whole study is how can we make this all more efficient, more effective, and have the effort be sitting in the right places with the people who are most able to effort.
So the remaining subdivisions regarding the December 2024 report have not been changed since yesterday. So I'm just going to keep moving on through, and then sections 10 through 12 of the bill are the technical changes relating to education and qualifications, listers and assessors. Those have not changed. This has the $100,000 appropriation moved over to a different section of statute. And there is still conforming revisions authority being given to legislative council. It is not specific as to the year, so this can be an ongoing. Initially, the change to a state office was made effective in July of this year, so it would have been this summer. However, since that change is being made in 2025, this would be more of a ongoing or future statutory revision authority, which is common for our office to have. We have a list actually that we maintain when we do statutory revision and replace 3 book volumes so that we know to look for instances in statute that are no longer effective, and those often go into the technical corrections bill, but this also gives us authority to make the change when we're communicating with our publisher. So the effective dates are different now. They're not highlighted because they are the same as yesterday, but because there have been sort of a shuffling of sections, they're slightly different. So I did just want to review these. So the bill, sort of the default effective date for the bill, for the act is this July 1st, 2023. And then there's in the first subdivision a special, it's not really an effective date, but clarifying the application of the removal of the CLA requirement to trigger a reappraisal, makes it clear that that applies retroactively to grand lists that are lodged on and after April 1st of 2022. Subsection 2 makes it clear that the repeal of the $8.50 per parcel fee takes effect on January 1st of 2025. And then subdivision 3 makes all of these sections relating to moving reappraisals to a state office effective July 1st, 2025. And then that is the end of the bill and the changes that have been made.
Thanks. Julia, is there anything you want to tell us that you haven't already told us?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Chair, I'd make a motion that we vote on this.
What direction would you like us to go?
Vote favorable. Sorry.
We're on like bill number 5 of the day.
A lot of really good work done here and on a pretty complex topic.
Yeah, thank you, Abby.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Put all this together.
Would anyone like to second before we discuss
Sure.
the wonders of the bill? Thank you. So Representative Demrow moved that we that we create a committee bill actually
Right.
and find it favorable.
Let's make it.
Representative Maslin seconded. Any discussion?
It's cool.
Representative Brannigan.
So the big issues in this bill are that we get rid of the $8.50. And what are we doing with the CLA? We're also getting rid of that.
We're not removing the CLA as a adjustment mechanism on people's taxes yet. We're removing it as a trigger for reappraisal requirements. And the study, which the implementation plan, not a study, an implementation plan, will examine whether statistical reappraisals might be able to replace the CLA as an adjustment mechanism.
The COD,
The COD still stays as a trigger, but does not change.
these things is the trigger, things out.
But will be all studied and implementation planned. And Representative Beck will be here in a few minutes in case anyone's wondering about, worrying about him.
he's presenting it.
No, he'll be here in a minute. I'm just,
Ah.
in case anyone's like, where's Scott? We're talking about this.
The 50,000, that one time,
Abby, do you want to come? Do you want to talk to Abby about this or would you rather?
I have absolute confidence in you, but Abby probably knows it. The 50,000, tell me again what that is for. It's not much money.
So that was the request from the department to assist them with the implementation plan. So that all of the deliverables that are being required at the end of December 24, this would already be available to the department starting in this July. So they would have the whole, almost 2 years to use that money to complete the report.
And who will inform the towns that we're doing this? How will the town clerk association and so forth?
The department's work or the bill itself? I can't speak for the department, but and there isn't actually any explicit requirement here for them to work with stakeholders, but I imagine they would.
They basically said they wanted all of this time to create an implementation plan so that they could work really deeply with stakeholders, especially the Appraisers Association and the Clerks Association, and then some national experts on this.
Okay, so they're thinking in that way already.
Yeah, they really wanted, that's why they want this time, is so that they can do that.
Even though I said they're not explicitly required to work with stakeholders, there's so much about working with towns and providing guidance to towns. There isn't really any way they could do that work without engaging, at the very least, the municipalities that would be the most affected by this, because listers would be essentially removed from the reappraisal process. I apologize. I just realized that I didn't change the committees that the report will be sent to. Do you want me to add in the committees? At one point, we've mentioned that I didn't take a note, so I forgot to add that in. Government operations, I think, was another request to have the report go to, or do you want it just to
I was thinking it could just come to
your
us and we can
Okay.
talk to them.
Okay,
But,
so it doesn't need to be changed.
and I generally want to see things out perfect as I want to see them implemented into law. That's probably more obsessively than is actually helpful for the purposes of a non-unicameral legislature. But I am actually really looking forward to the Senate's work on this because I think it could benefit from even more work and more stakeholder engagement. Yeah, I really very much feel that, and
But I think this is a good start.
I think it's a really good start to hand over to them.
I do too. I can't see any reason why we shouldn't vote for this.
I'm just wondering, do you have any idea, Abby, is this gonna add full-time employees?
I think the department would have to speak to that.
There's no full-time employee that $50,000 could hire in the state government, I would say.
Right.
Are you asking for the implementation plan aspect or the state office? Because I think it's very clear the state office would require more employees or the language does authorize the department to contract as well. Because of I think the resource aspect of lack of appraisers.
Right. No, I was just wondering about full-time employees, so I was thinking of the state.
For the plan.
Yeah.
I think the department would have to answer that question.
Representative Demmerly, please.
I'm 100% behind this. I don't think that we really have much choice here, but my biggest concern around it is what happens with listers in the end. By taking the reappraisal piece out of their court, they're still gonna be the boots on the ground. They're still gonna have to look at each property in town. They're still gonna have to, figure out all that stuff, but without some of this higher level work here, I worry about whether the trade-off between taking that work away from them, they already have too much work and we don't have enough listers, versus will losing this piece be less enticing to them? That's the one piece that I worry about, and I don't think there's any way for us to get around that, because we have trouble getting all kinds of folks in municipal government these days, and listers are no exception. And I think we've just gotta find a way to lessen their workload to a certain degree.
And I think that's why we're
Yeah.
pitching this
Just
over to the
want-
department to try to thread that,
Yeah.
absolutely. Representative Anthony, and Abby, you're welcome to do whatever's comfortable.
I totally agree, and that's why I was championing retention of the PCA, frankly. But you can't underestimate the value when you get to a reappraisal of the grand list being in good shape. And frankly, sending that message saying we really need you to make that grand list legit, because otherwise it'll cost twice as much to reappraise. It's so important.
I have to say one more.
You may.
I do think the reappraisals cause a significant amount of stress for listers. And I think taking this away from them and not, I mean, it's like, it's always hanging over their head and they dread it. And just not having this, I think, will help.
Representative Sims and then Representative Anthony. You did have your hand raised.
I did.
You don't have to talk.
No, well. I just would build on what you're saying. I think the consistency too is something I'm really looking forward to, and like the predictable schedule, like I think this is hopefully gonna help spread effort and help us do this work better, and I appreciate the approach to thread the needle of not immediately stopping everything that we're doing, but keep doing what we're doing and find a better path at the same time. And I think hopeful that it will get us to a much better place. It will ease burden.
Representative Anthony?
Just real quick, because I feel so strongly about maintaining the grand list, it may be that the $2 fee into the future ought to be examined in terms of its viability. It's a shot in the dark at the moment, admittedly.
Anyone else? Scott, do you feel you just crashed into the room?
I'm trying to catch up.
Do you want us to make small talk for a few more minutes?
So make sure I know what I'm looking at here. But take a second for the small talk. We're on 4.2, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So really, Abby and I had this very funny conversation about like the levels of seriousness between like task force and studies and implementation plans. And I think we're threading a really good needle about naming what we don't know and what needs to happen here. And then trusting the department to work with stakeholders to figure all that stuff out.
Is this a question?
Yeah.
Is there room in this language for room for a process possibility going forward where we have reappraisals that update on an annual basis and we can eliminate the CLA?
Absolutely. That's, yes. Yeah, that's absolutely part of the study.
Okay.
Yeah. Implementation plan. Yes. All of your live streams are in this bill.
Something for everybody.
Okay.
Can I just
Yeah.
chime in to say, like, when we were sort of stalled on this process, I couldn't imagine a path forward, and I'm so impressed that this is where we landed. So yeah, thank you so much for your work on this.
And Jill at PVR.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
At
100%.
home.
The whole,
Rebecca.
it's the whole team at Tax. It's
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, Jill's done valiant work, but
I did not make any of this up.
you did because you kept on coming back, trying to make it clearer and clearer.
Absolutely.
You didn't kill us.
And with that,
Andrews, yes. Anthony,
Yep.
Beck,
Yes.
Brannigan,
Yes.
Demrow,
Yes.
Maslin.
Yep.
Matos.
Yep.
Bodie. Sims.
Yes.
Taylor.
Yes.
Canfield.
Yes.
Kornheiser.
yes,
Whoa.
12-0-0.
everyone.
I love it.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, congratulations, thank you. We are gonna talk about cannabis because Michelle's gonna be here inside the computer